Goldberg came hurtling across the ring like a living wrecking ball, the embodiment of power and fury drawn from years of dominance, raw intensity etched into every movement as he charged with the full weight of his legacy behind him. But in a moment of split-second awareness and tactical genius, Gunther, the calculating and precise ring general, slipped out of harm's way, leaving Goldberg to collide violently with referee Charles Robinson. The veteran official, beloved and respected in the industry for decades, crumpled to the mat in a heap, the victim of a spear that was never meant for him. The crowd gasped in unison, the air sucked out of the arena as fans tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Gunther had escaped unscathed, but the match was now spiraling into uncharted chaos. At ringside, all eyes turned to Goldberg's family. His wife Wanda was visibly shaken, her hands over her heart, while his son Gage stood frozen before his eyes narrowed in fury. Emotions that had never truly healed came roaring back to life, memories of Atlanta, of humiliation, of Gunther standing over Goldberg and taunting their family in front of a hometown crowd. That night had been traumatic, not just for the legend in the ring but for the people who loved him. Security personnel urgently waved at Gage to stay behind the barricade, yelling, "Put your hands down!" But the pain and pride boiling inside him couldn't be contained. And then Gage jumped the barricade, his face contorted with rage, fists clenched and ready to defend his father. But WWE officials and security intercepted him mid-stride, pulling him back before he could reach the ring. It was a powder keg moment, 1 second slower, and this might have devolved into a full-scale melee. Yet, perhaps that flash of defiance from his son was the spark Goldberg needed. His eyes lit up, something primitive igniting in his chest. The crowd, sensing the shift, began chanting his name, and with a guttural roar that shook the rafters, Goldberg lunged forward and unleashed a devastating spear that folded Gunther in half. The arena exploded, years of nostalgia and adrenaline flooding the building as Goldberg stood, chest heaving, a living monument to resilience. And then, as if time reversed itself, he hoisted Gunther into the air for a jackhammer. The power, the technique, the precision, it was all still there. He drove Gunther down with such ferocity that even longtime fans who had seen 1,000 jackhammers before stood frozen in disbelief. This wasn't a tribute act. This was Goldberg doing what Goldberg does. But the universe wasn't done playing cruel tricks. With Charles Robinson still unconscious, a second referee, Sean Bennett, ran to the ring, but he had a visible limp, his knee compromised. Goldberg, now clutching at his own leg in pain, dragged himself across the canvas like a soldier on a battlefield. He threw his body over Gunther's chest for the pin, but the delay was fatal. 1, 2, and Gunther kicked out. The collective heartbreak was palpable. Goldberg looked up in disbelief, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent plea. The jackhammer hadn't ended it. Time, wear, injury, and fate had stolen his triumph. Gunther, ever the opportunist, rose behind him like a shadow made of stone. In an instant, he locked in a rear-naked choke, the sleeper hold expertly applied with brutal efficiency. The crowd screamed for Goldberg to fight. His fingers clawed at Gunther's arms, dug at the air, scratched at the mat. But Gunther's hold was suffocating. Goldberg tried to roll. He tried to rise. He tried to channel that last ounce of energy he had used so many times before to overcome impossible odds. But this was different. This was reality catching up. This was the final reckoning. His arms began to shake. His face turned pale. The blood supply cut, the oxygen vanished. Goldberg's limbs weakened. His chest rose and fell in shallow bursts. His eyes fluttered. The grip tightened. And finally, with no choice left, his body went limp. The referee stepped in, raising his arm once, twice, 3 times, no response. The bell rang. The match was over. Gunther released the hold and stood tall, victorious once more, still the world heavyweight champion. But the moment was far from celebratory. The arena was silent, not out of anger or shock, but in reverence. Goldberg lay still in the center of the ring, his body a symbol of every war he had waged. Around him, the crowd slowly rose to their feet, offering a standing ovation not for the winner, but for the warrior who had given them a lifetime of moments, of matches, of memories. For 28 years, Goldberg had been the storm, undeniable, ferocious, fearless. He had cut through the industry like a thunderbolt, lifting wrestling into mainstream culture, inspiring countless careers, and carrying promotions on his back when few others could. But tonight, in front of his family, his fans, and his legacy, the storm had finally passed. Gage was escorted back to his seat, Wanda wiping tears from her eyes. Gunther walked up the ramp holding the championship high, but even he didn't gloat. Because this wasn't just a victory. It was a generational torch passed, earned in pain, sweat, and silence. And for Goldberg, lying motionless in the ring, it was no longer about who's next. It was about what's next, for a man who was once unstoppable, now mortal, now still, now remembered forever. Goldberg came charging like a freight train, his instincts pure aggression and muscle memory from decades in the ring, but in a flash of tactical brilliance, Gunther sidestepped with calculated precision, sending Goldberg barreling straight into Charles Robinson, the longtime referee who had seen it all, until now. The crowd gasped as Robinson went down hard, the spear clearly not meant for him but devastating all the same. Gunther moved out of harm's way, but chaos erupted in the aftermath. All eyes turned to ringside where Goldberg's wife Wanda had leapt to her feet, her hand over her mouth in horror, while their son Gage stood up with clenched fists, his jaw locked in anger. Security urged him to calm down, shouting, "Put your hands down," but that was never going to happen. Gage had lived through this before, in Atlanta, when Gunther had humiliated his father in their hometown, breaking not just Goldberg's body but the spirit of his legacy. Tonight was supposed to be about redemption, but all those wounds were wide open again. With no hesitation, Gage launched himself over the barricade, adrenaline and rage fueling him, but security swarmed just in time, dragging him back before things turned tragic. And maybe it was that moment, the rage in his son's eyes, the fear in his wife's face, that sparked something primal in Goldberg. Without warning, he surged back to his feet, roared like a beast from another era, and delivered a spine-shattering spear to Gunther that sent shockwaves through the ring. The crowd erupted, the roar shaking the arena as Goldberg stood over Gunther, sweat dripping, chest heaving. It was like watching a ghost from a golden age materialize. The disbelief on fans' faces turned into electric anticipation. Was this it? Did Goldberg have one more miracle left? Slowly, painfully, he pulled Gunther up and, with trembling arms, lifted the massive champion into the air. Time froze. Goldberg planted Gunther into the mat with a jackhammer so brutal it echoed like thunder. The fans counted instinctively, 1, 2, and then gasped as they realized there was no referee. Robinson was still unconscious, and in a scramble, a second official, Sean Bennett, and all that REM.